Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. This next story is from Ontario, Canada. This is the unsolved murder of Valerie Karen Stevens. Valerie Karen Stevens disappeared on September the 9th, 1989. She was 19 years old and a young mother of a young daughter. She left her daughter in the care of a teenage couple, and she went out with some friends. She went out to meet some friends at a nightclub called the Diamond Club. Valerie was also pregnant at the time, and she was never seen alive again. The young couple stayed with her daughter for about 2 days when they began to realize they needed to find out where Valerie was. So they reported her. It just says they reported her absence. I don't know if this meant that they called the police or if they just called some of her family up and said she hasn't returned to get her child or what. But Valerie was receiving welfare at the time and her check went unclaimed. Her bank account had not been touched. So the police knew by this that something was wrong because this was her sole source of income. Now, I don't know anything about how much they investigated into her disappearance, if they went back to this club and talked to the people that she went to meet that night. I couldn't find any details about any of the time between her being reported missing and her being found. Valerie's skeletal remains were discovered 3 years later in October 1992 by hunters in a wooded area near Burford, Ontario. The autopsy could not determine the cause of death, but police say it was foul play. Some witnesses suggest that Valerie may have been hitchhiking that night. So are they saying that she left this club alone and was just going to try to hitchhike a ride back home, and this could have led to her fate? Does that mean she hitchhiked a ride home with someone, or does that mean she set out to walk down the road with her thumb out in order to try to catch a ride? 30-year-old murder mystery sits near the heart of Robin Stevens. She wants answers. I want to know how someone could do something so horrible. So this was the little daughter that she had. As her daughter grew up, never knowing what happened to her mother, she went to the police detective who was investigating, Andy Packer. He was one of the officers assigned to her case back in 1992. She said he was tremendously supportive. He let her look at her mom's file and the photographs. Robin remembers, this was her daughter, Robin remembers how he explained that the investigators were pursuing many different leads, including the possibility that a migrant worker employed at a nearby tobacco farm could have been responsible for her mother's murder. They could also believe that Valerie may have crossed paths with Alan Craig MacDonald. Now, he was a serial killer, and he was responsible for the murder of Lydia Shaw in 1990. He had served 12 years in prison for gunning down a police officer and a witness in Nova Scotia. He had been paroled in 1998 and had relocated to a halfway house in the nearby community of Brantford. Now, he stayed there until he was granted full parole. Now, this man, MacDonald, committed suicide in 1994. This was before DNA evidence tied him to Shaw's death. So, some people believe that Valerie may have crossed paths with this man. Robin started her own investigation into her mother's disappearance and murder. She visited the local library to do research. And she learned that her mother, Valerie, had no connection to the community where her remains were found. Now, there were other women who were going missing and being found later murdered in this area, and some of them were, they said, transported great distances from where they were last seen. So whoever this was, and I'm not saying it was the same person involved in all these cases, but police believe it was because of the arrangements of the items of these dead women. Before I begin the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to like and subscribe to the channel so you can hear more content. So Robin started her own investigation, and she started reaching out to some of the people that knew her mom at that time, and one of the friends who she was supposed to meet up with that night. She learned quite a bit about that night. Robin informed authorities that the friend claimed to have called the apartment that night, asking if Valerie was on her way. Yet authorities reported no record of that incoming call. So did she really call? Did the babysitter say anybody called that night looking for her? Eventually, Robin found the courage to visit the area where her mother's remains were found. So this Valerie, she was 19 years old. She already had a 17-month-old daughter, and she was pregnant. She left her daughter in the care of friends, a teenage couple. She left her apartment to go dancing downtown at the Diamond Club and was never seen again. The police were alerted of her disappearance by the babysitter. They said they'd been taking care of her daughter for 2 days and Valerie had not returned. After her disappearance, the police watched. Her welfare checks went uncashed and her bank account remained untouched. Her skeletal remains were found in October of 1992. So this couple waited around her apartment for a couple of days, and finally, I guess they thought, we can't just continue to just stay here. So they went to one of Valerie's relatives' homes and said, here's the baby. She never came back to get the baby, so this family member contacted the police. So the police looked into what might be going on, and they found that she was about a month behind on her rent. She had a couple of other overdue bills, but it was nothing that they considered that maybe this would have happened. Now, her father believes that she may have gotten involved with the wrong people and that possibly she gotten mixed up with some people who were involved in drugs. So 2 hunters were walking through the woods when they discovered the bones. They found some women's clothing near the bones. They found a pair of black jeans, a pair of white lace-up boots, and these were found near the body. The skeleton was buried under leaves off of the road. They took her skull and they used this technique called anthropometrics, where they used the skull to create a picture over her skull of what she may have looked like. They released this to the public, and within days, relatives reached out and said they believed this was Valerie. If you hear that beeping sound in the background on this, it's some county road work taking place nearby. It was reported later that Valerie had a older cousin who she had told family members had molested her, and he had also been charged twice for the rape of a 16-year-old when he was much older. And they wonder if maybe he might have had some involvement in Valerie's disappearance. So some of the police and some of the people in the area believe that Valerie's disappearance and death may have also been linked to a number of other young women who had started to disappear and whose remains would be found around the late 80s, 90s in the Ontario area. So it's said that Valerie Stevens had left I don't know, I couldn't find a whole lot of details about the relationship with the father of her daughter, but she had left. It said she left very quickly and went into the public housing and got an apartment for herself and her daughter. I think there's something led her to get away from that relationship very quickly. Now, her daughter grew up. She was adopted by one of Valerie Stevens' family members about 2 years after her mother died. And at that point, they didn't even know that her mother was dead. Her mother was a missing person for 3 years until her remains were discovered. And I don't know how long it took. They put out a composite of what they thought she might look like. They used a technique where they made an image of her using her skull, and people started calling saying they believed that it was Valerie Stevens, and that's how her identity was confirmed. Now, the single mother was 19 years old when she died, when she went missing. She didn't go out a lot, and when she did go out, she would repeatedly call the babysitter to check on her daughter. But on September the 9th, 1989, a girlfriend that she had known since childhood invited her to go out to a Toronto nightclub. And she left her daughter Robin at the home in care of a trusted couple. She kissed her daughter goodbye, and she never returned home from that club. 3 years later, in October of 1992, hunters outside of Brantford discovered the young woman's remains. Police never determined the cause of death, but it was ruled a homicide. Her murder remains an open investigation. Now, her daughter, Robin Stevens, explained that she had a happy childhood. She was initially unaware of what happened to her mother. She did suspect that she was adopted, and that curtain was pulled back during a hospital visit when she was 12 years old. She had sprained her ankle and was taken to the hospital. And when they called out her name, Stevens, her mom said, "Come on, let's go." And she said, "That's not my name." And this is when the conversation began that revealed that she had been adopted by these people who were relatives of her mother. And they told her the story of how her mother went missing when she was only a baby. Now her world was turned upside down, and she says, "I now understand why they didn't want to tell me this." She has no memory of her mother or the housing unit where they lived together very briefly. She did learn that her parents' relationship was rocky, and soon after her birth, the conditions became so bad that Valerie packed her few belongings and moved into emergency subsidized housing in Toronto's Flemington Park. After her mother disappeared, Robin was bounced around between family members to avoid being placed in what they call Children's Aid Society. Here in America, we would call that foster care. At age 2, she was adopted by her mother's aunt and uncle. They raised her along with their 2 sons, and she says that her teenage years were difficult. She started to have some mental health issues that she never got solved until she was an adult, when she started going to therapy to heal the broken parts of herself. She says, "I did not want to pass this on to my children." During this time period in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a series of women, at least 4 others, besides Lydia Shaw and Valerie, who were thought to maybe possibly have been linked to this serial killer. Now, we do know that McDonald was responsible for Lydia Shaw, but it was later said that one of these women, and I will get into that story, I will do a follow-up on all of that, but they believe that her killer was a different man. So do they believe that this other man was possibly responsible for all these other murders as well? And were they able to get any DNA? They said that Valerie's clothing was left behind. Did they take those clothing and keep them? Did they test her remains, pretty much her skeleton at that time that she was found? But Robin continued to search into her mother's disappearance. She visited the local library. She talked to the police. She reached out to her mother's past friends, and she spoke with acquaintances. She spoke with the woman that Valerie was supposed to have met that night to go out dancing, and she says that she didn't meet up with her that night, that she never showed up, and that she called the house to look for her, and that she was informed by the babysitter that Valerie had left to go out, but she says that she never showed up, so they have no way to confirm that. She discovered that in the months before her mother's life was taken, she was making plans to move to Ottawa. Valerie intended to complete her high school degree and study to become a nurse. She wanted change in her life. She wanted to give me a better life. The detective, Andy Packer, retired in 2017, and Constable Sean Webb picked up the case. She said he was also very supportive, that she periodically posts on social media to keep her mother's name out there. It used to consume me in my 20s, but I had to put a halt to it because it was taking a toll on my mental health. She's convinced that there are people out there that know more about her mother's disappearance than they admit. I think there were people who were with my mom that night. Now, she believes that her mom did meet up with these friends at this club, and that maybe they left the club that night and something occurred. Maybe one of these men that she might have met up with at that club that night. Maybe she went off alone with someone that she met from the club that night. Maybe the friend told this whole story about she didn't show up because she was afraid for herself. Maybe she was afraid one of these people would come after her if it got out. Or maybe she really didn't know anything. Maybe Valerie changed her plans at the last minute. But she doesn't believe that. Robin, the daughter, doesn't believe that. She believes that someone out there knows and just kept it quiet. And like I said, I don't know if they were able to find any DNA or anything like that. She is optimistic that one day she'll be able to find the answer as to who killed her mother and left her remains in this wooded area. And she says if anyone has any information, they can call 1-888-310-1122. And I do plan to do some follow-ups on these other women, Lydia Shaw, and these other women as well. And this may turn into another series of serial killings in Ontario and that area. Thanks for watching.